Hey guys, tonight we're going to sea. Not the warm, postcard perfect sea you dream of when scrolling vacation deals, but the kind that sloshes under a rickety wooden dock at 3 in the morning. Cold, fishy, and with a faint smell of something that might have once been a goat. You're barefoot, of course, because your sandals are probably already stolen, and the linen tunic clinging to your back has soaked up just enough dew to feel like someone wrung out a sponge over your shoulder blades. You're in ancient Greece, somewhere between the late 5th and early 4th century BCE, and you've just been nudged awake by a man with eyebrows like storm clouds. He doesn't say much, just hands you a bronze helmet, a short sword with a nicked blade, and, for some unknowable reason, a fig. Breakfast, probably. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, drop your current location and local time in the comments. I love seeing where and when you're drifting off from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The harbor's still asleep, or pretending to be. You hear the occasional creak of a dock rope, a distant dog bark that somehow sounds philosophical, and the unmistakable splash of someone falling into the water who definitely wasn't supposed to. It's a scene lit not by sun, but by oil lamps and a sliver of moon, just enough light to see the outline of your trireme, looming like a three-eyed beast. You shuffle forward with the other farm hands, potters, fishmongers, and one guy who swears he's a poet, and step onto the deck. Someone sneezes, someone else prays. The wood groans under your feet like it's annoyed to be woken up. Your commander, whose name you immediately forget, is already barking orders. He wears a cloak far too clean for someone who claims to be battle-hardened. You suspect he hasn't fought anything more threatening than a sneeze this week. "Form ranks," he yells. "Which ranks?" someone mutters. No one answers. You find your spot near the middle deck, wedged between a man who smells strongly of onions and another who looks like he's already mentally drafting his retirement speech. You clutch your helmet tighter. This isn't your first time on a trireme, but that doesn't make it better. You know the floor will be slick with salt and fish guts. You know the benches will splinter under you if you shift wrong. And you know, above all else, that there will be shouting. So much shouting. But for now, there's the dock, there's the boat, and there's that fig in your hand, which you finally bite into. It's dry, slightly sandy, possibly dropped. A whistle blows. A goat bleats in the distance as if trying to warn you. Now comes the muster. Everyone's counted, named, and listed in a scroll held by a man who looks like he'd rather be dead than mispronounce another name. Yours is butchered, of course, turned from Eudoros into something like Avidaros, but you don't correct him. He's holding the stylus like a weapon. Best not to argue. The oars are checked. The ram at the bow is polished by a sleepy teen who yawns directly into the bronze. Someone tightens the ropes, holding the sail, even though you won't be using it today. This is close quarters stuff. Coastal combat, not elegant ocean voyages with dolphins dancing off the prow. Someone starts a song, one of those old rowing chants meant to build morale and keep rhythm. It starts low and wobbly, but a few others join in. The man beside you hums off-key. You hum along anyway. It's tradition. It also distracts from the fact that you're about to sail toward people actively trying to kill you. You glance over the edge of the trireme and see lantern light dancing across the water. Other ships are preparing. The sea is a forest of masts. Some tilt slightly, some creak dramatically. One already looks like it's sinking, though the crew insists it's just leaning confidently. Historians still argue whether these naval battles were strategically brilliant or just an excuse for coastal city-states to work out their grudges with a little oceanic flair. Athens versus Corinth. Aegina versus, well, everyone. There's always a quarrel. Someone's cousin insulted someone's fig vendor, and now 100 men are arming up. One record even suggests a battle was fought because someone painted an owl wrong on a shield. Is that true? No one knows. But it sounds about right. A priest steps onto the dock. He mumbles a blessing towards the boats, waving a branch of something vaguely holy. You squint, it might be celery. You're not sure it worked. A bird promptly defecates on the ram of your ship. An omen? Probably. But what kind? You decide it's good luck. Definitely good luck. You tell yourself that until you almost believe it. Then, the shout. Cast off! The ropes drop. Oars splash. Your stomach drops lower. The sea sways under you like a drunk philosopher. Gentle one moment, argumentative the next. The air smells of pitch and brine and fish, always fish. You settle onto your rowing bench and take a deep breath. It's beginning. And like most things in ancient Greece, it will begin with confusion, possibly a poem, and almost certainly a sunburn. The boat rocks gently at first. It's the kind of motion that would feel relaxing if you weren't sitting on a narrow wooden bench, surrounded by 169 other men who, collectively, smell like a forgotten pantry. The trireme begins to pull away from the dock, and the oars dip into the water with a soft slap. You join the rhythm. Not quite in sync at first, but close enough that no one yells at you. Yet, the man ahead of you grunts with every pull. The one behind hums tunelessly, pausing now and then to cough dramatically into the back of your head. It's going to be a long morning. Your legs are already complaining. The wooden beam beneath you offers no cushion, and the rope binding your foot to the oar rubs like a particularly resentful snake. You row anyway. That's what you signed up for, sort of. You mostly wanted the payment in olives and amphorae of wine. The maybe dying in a watery mess part was conveniently brushed over by the recruiter. Ahead, the ship's prow slices through the still dark sea. You can barely make out the shadowy shapes of other triremes in formation, all groaning and straining as they make their way toward wherever this naval squabble will unfold. You hope someone brought a map. You did not. Now the real fun begins. Synchronization. You're part of the middle deck, which means you're one of the main engines. The top rowers have slightly better airflow. The bottom rowers, poor souls, are practically swimming. You all rely on the Calyustes, the man with the drum. He doesn't speak much, but his thudding beat controls the entire rhythm of the ship. Boom, row. Boom, row. Boom, your shoulder pops slightly. You don't even think anymore. The beat takes over. It becomes automatic, like chewing or regretting last night's lentil stew. Occasionally the rhythm falters when someone sneezes or a seagull decides to land on the prow. But for the most part, it's a strange sort of harmony. You hate it, and yet something is soothing about it. By now, you've lost all sense of direction. You don't know where the sun is. You don't know where land is. You mostly know the back of the sweaty neck in front of you. Occasionally, someone tries to peer over the side and throws off the balance. And then the man ahead of you farts. You inhale, you regret everything. No one says anything. There is a sacred pact among rowers. We do not speak of the smells. We suffer in silence and salt. A seagull lets out a laugh that feels personal. Hours pass, or maybe minutes. Time doesn't exist here, only the drumbeat. Your arms ache, your knees throb, your palms are starting to blister. You wonder what heroic songs they'll write about you. Probably none, unless you die dramatically. And even then, they'll probably get your name wrong. Historians still argue whether the average trireme rower was a citizen soldier, a hired mercenary, or just someone who lost a bet. You're beginning to think it might have been all three. Everyone on this boat looks like they have very different reasons for being here, none of them noble. There's an older man near the stern muttering verses from Homer, or at least something vaguely poetic. It might also be a recipe for boiled onions, hard to say. You finally get a moment to pause, not stop. Just ease up when the triarch captain orders a slow drift. You lean back just slightly. Your spine cracks in 5 places. You're pretty sure your sweat has started to develop a personality of its own. The man next to you offers a piece of dried fig. You accept. You chew. It tastes like sadness and bark. Suddenly, someone shouts from the lookout platform. Ships on the horizon. You squint, but your eyes are full of sea spray and disappointment. You see shapes, yes, silhouettes against the sky. Are they friend or foe? Who knows? They're pointed toward you, which is never a great sign. The ship comes alive. Commands echo from the front. The drummer starts a sharper beat. Your oar dips back in. Everyone rows harder now, not faster, just more. Anxious. And here comes the kicker. The enemy ships look just like yours. That's right. In the grand tradition of ancient warfare, distinguishing features are optional. Sometimes, a city-state might paint a sea serpent or an owl on the prow, or tie ribbons to the mast. Today, nothing. Everyone forgot. You're all just a bunch of men in boats, trying to kill other men in boats that look the same. You try to remember which side you're on. You think it's Athens, or maybe Aegina. You definitely remember someone shouting something angry about Corinth. That's probably who you're supposed to hate today. Someone nearby mutters, "Wait, what if we hit our own side?" Silence, then. Row anyway. The triremes begin to converge. Yours creaks ominously as the prow is adjusted. The helmsman yells something about ramming speed. The drummer picks up the pace. You row faster, now gasping between strokes. Water splashes in your face, and someone behind you starts retching. You realize with grim clarity that you've gone from groggy citizen to living torpedo. You stare ahead at the enemy ship, still distant but growing. You wonder if their rowers feel the same fear. Probably, you hope. It's comforting to imagine shared nausea. Someone shouts, "Owl on the sail must be Corinth." Another voice, "That's our owl, you idiot." You sigh. This is going to be a mess. The call comes sharp and final. Full stroke. You don't question. You just dig your oar deep and pull like your dinner depends on it, which it does technically. The ship lurches forward as if startled. Around you, oars slap in chaotic unison. You're no longer paddling toward a vague threat. You're now a rapidly moving wedge of pine and sweat aimed directly at another equally confused group of men who were probably hoping to avoid this exact scenario. The enemy trireme grows larger by the heartbeat. It wobbles a little, either turning or just terribly steered. You spot someone waving a flag, but it's unclear whether that's a military signal or just panic. Possibly both. Your commander yells something heroic that you can't hear over the creaking of wood, the yelling of rowers, and the unsettling sound of someone praying in falsetto. This is it. This is what you trained for. Kind of. Boom, boom, boom. The drummer's rhythm pounds through your bones. At this point, rowing is less about strength and more about raw, unfiltered willpower. Your arms scream, your back stabs, but you keep going, because if you don't, your oar might snap or worse, get caught and yank you clean off your bench. You can practically taste the bronze of the prow cutting through the mist. The air's thicker now, full of anticipation, salt, and old onions. You clench your jaw. You think of figs, of home, of naps, and then crack, you hit. It's not a cinematic boom, it's a crunching, splintering mess of wood on wood. The prow of your ship smashes into the hull of the enemy, sending a shudder down every rib and into your teeth. You feel the recoil in your wrists. Someone yelps. Someone else is flung sideways into the rowers below. The boat shimmies violently, but it holds. Somehow, it holds. You hear the cries above shouting, steel on shield, the unmistakable sound of two grown men tripping over each other and falling into a crate of grappling hooks. You glance up, but all you see is chaos. Boarding parties have begun. Your ship grinds against the other like two tired oxen jostling for shade. The crew begins to surge upward, armed with short swords, shields, and the kind of misplaced confidence only desperation can birth. You are not technically part of the boarding party. You're a rower. But the man next to you has already stood up and is now yelling something about glory and destiny as he climbs the ladder. So much for sticking to the job description. You follow, mostly because staying below means risking being crushed by your own shipmates' sandals. You climb up to the top deck and are immediately greeted by the sight of two men trying to sword fight while standing on a tilting wet plank the size of a tavern shelf. One of them falls off. The other slips and celebrates anyway. You draw your sword. It's not impressive. The blade is slightly bent and you suspect it was once a kitchen knife in a past life, but it's yours. You step carefully onto the enemy vessel, boots slick with seawater. The first thing you notice, everyone looks just as confused as you are. A Corinthian soldier, probably. Corinthian glares at you, raises his shield, and promptly sneezes. You use the moment to knock him aside. He groans dramatically and crumples like a disappointed uncle at a poetry recital. Someone else tries to jab at you with a spear but misses by 3 entire feet. You both pause and look at the gap between you. It's awkward. You wave. He lowers the spear and shrugs. And that's when you realize no one actually wants to fight. Not really. They're tired. They're cold. Some of them are barefoot, and a few are clearly hungover. This isn't so much a war as it is a mildly violent misunderstanding between badly labeled ships. Historians still argue whether ancient Greek naval battles were truly decisive or mostly performative. Some say ramming tactics and elite boarding troops determined the outcome. Others claim it was a matter of who had fewer seasick rowers and slightly more intact planks. What's clear is that there was a lot of falling over. You see it happen over and over. A soldier charges, slips, and flails like a startled chicken. Shields clatter, helmets roll. At one point, someone throws a sandal, and it actually hits a target. The man who gets hit sits down quietly and decides that's enough heroism for the day. There's a lull. Not peace, exactly, more of a collective, unspoken agreement that everyone should take 5. You slump against the rail of the enemy ship, breathing hard. The sword hangs loose in your grip. Someone hands you a fig. You don't know who they are. You eat it anyway. It's not bad. To your left, a man in a helmet 3 sizes too big is trying to drink from a cracked amphora while bleeding slightly from the elbow. To your right, 2 teenagers are arguing over whether they should just pretend to be prisoners and let the captain sort it out. You admire their logic. The sky begins to shift pale gold, edging into the deep navy. Morning finally, birds circle above. One of them drops something on the deck. You decide not to look at it. Your commander, miraculously still alive and shouting, calls for withdrawal. Apparently someone thinks you've won. Or maybe you haven't. Who can tell? The enemy ship is half sunk, half commandeered, and entirely soggy. Yours isn't much better. The prow has a crack wide enough to fit a goat through. Still, orders are orders. You begin the delicate process of getting back across, stepping over tangled ropes, unconscious men, and at least one very angry-looking chicken. Yes, a chicken. No one knows where it came from. You return to your own trireme and collapse onto the oar bench. You exhale, then you sneeze. Your trireme is drifting now, not in defeat exactly, but not quite in triumph either. It floats in that in-between state so common in ancient Greek battles. Not glorious, not disgraceful, just wet and slightly tilted. The drummer, mercifully silent now, massages his wrists like a man recovering from a particularly emotional poetry reading. Your fellow rowers have slumped into varying states of half-consciousness. One man is humming. Another is whispering a prayer to Poseidon, in which he promises to give up wine, figs, and possibly even gambling. Though you can tell by his tone he doesn't mean it. You're allowed a brief pause. The trierarch shouts something vague about repositioning, but even he doesn't seem to know what direction that is. The sun is finally creeping up, painting the waves gold and making the blood on your tunic look slightly artistic. If you squint, you might even pretend this is just a scenic rowing expedition gone slightly wrong. And then someone asks the question no one wants to answer. Is there food? You glance around. No one has food. Not real food. You check your belt pouch. There's a fig pit and a bit of string. Useless. The man beside you pulls out what might once have been cheese, though it's now a philosophical abstraction of cheese. You politely decline. Breakfast today is seawater and the distant memory of olives. You try to distract yourself by watching the water. It's oddly peaceful now. Shards of wood bob around like sleepy driftwood ducks. One has a sandal on it, someone's lost, someone's soon to be missed. The enemy ship has drifted off at an angle, its crew doing roughly the same thing as yours, recovering, staring at the horizon, and wondering what just happened. There's a shared nod between one of your men and one of theirs across the waves. Not truce, just, yeah, that was a lot. A gull lands on the mast and squawks triumphantly, as if it commanded the entire operation. Maybe we should make him general, someone mutters. You chuckle, then immediately regret the movement. Your ribs feel like someone played dice with them. Your lower back has started writing letters of complaint to your spine. Your thighs are staging a rebellion. But you're alive. And in a Greek sea battle, that's pretty good. Your ship begins slowly turning towards the coastline. The helmsman, who has likely been awake for 18 straight hours, leans heavily on the tiller. The sail is lowered, though there's barely any wind, and the oarsmen give a few tentative strokes, just enough to convince the boat to obey. That's when your commander decides now is the time for a speech. He stands, wobbles a bit, and clears his throat. "Brothers," he calls. A few heads lift. One man burps in response. "We have shown them our strength." You assume "them" refers to the enemy, not the gulls. "We have proven our mettle." A dented helmet rolls by. "And we have, by Zeus, preserved our city's honor." A wave slaps him directly in the face mid-sentence. The moment passes. He wipes his face and continues, damp but undeterred. "You are true sons of the sea. And when we return, the agora will ring with tales of our valor." You look around. No one is listening. One guy is inspecting a blister. Another is gently rocking a crate, whispering to what might be a fish inside. Someone is using a broken shield as a pillow. Your commander sits back down, defeated not by war, but by general apathy. Historians still argue whether morale was actually a strong suit of ancient naval forces, or whether these speeches were mostly for the benefit of statues later. There are fragments of records scratched onto pottery and stone, describing great naval pep talks. But how many of those were exaggerated? How many truly roused the spirits of men who just wanted a warm bath and a nap? Based on current vibes aboard this ship, probably not many. You stare at the horizon, where the morning light makes the coastal hills glow. Somewhere up there is your city, your bed, your sandals if no one took them. The thought alone is enough to make your hands twitch forward on the oar. You begin rowing again, not fast, but steadily. One by one, others join. There's no command, no drummer, just the quiet pull of returning home. Then someone sneezes into the wind, and it sprays backward. Chaos briefly resumes. Rowers sputter, someone loses grip on their oar, and a minor argument erupts over personal space and the ethics of garlic consumption before battle. The sea rocks gently, as if sighing at your lack of composure. Still, you make progress. Slowly, the shape of the coastline becomes more distinct. You can see the cliffside shrines now, perched like sleepy watchers. Somewhere behind them, the agora will soon begin stirring. Vendors sweeping out stalls, bakers starting their fires. And there you'll arrive soaked, bruised and smelling like wet bronze, but definitely with a story. Whether anyone believes it is another matter entirely. As you approach the port, another trireme passes by on its way out. Its crew looks marginally less bedraggled than yours, but not by much. They nod at you. You nod back. A universal message passed silently. Good luck. Also, don't forget to tie down your sandals. The dock comes into view, mercifully empty aside from one old man in a straw hat, and a goat who appears to be in charge of nothing in particular. The ropes are thrown. The ship bumps against the wood. A rope ladder is lowered, though half the men just roll themselves off the side and crawl ashore like sad clams. You disembark with as much dignity as someone leaking seawater can manage. Your legs barely remember how land works, but you're back. And for a brief, blissful moment, you swear you can smell lentils cooking from the homes above. You shuffle inland, not march, not stride. Shuffle, like an old slipper being dragged reluctantly across a stone floor. Your legs have achieved a consistency somewhere between boiled barley and philosophical regret, and your knees are making sounds that really should be studied by natural philosophers. Behind you, Your trireme creaks gently at the dockside, still dripping from the morning's adventure. The goat on the pier watches you leave with what might be disdain or admiration. It's hard to tell with goats. The old man next to it mutters something about youth these days, which is especially impressive considering he's possibly the only living soul who remembers the last time this harbor was attacked by pirates, or at least strongly inconvenienced by them. You turn down a cobbled path lined with low, sun-warmed houses. Laundry flaps overhead. The city is waking up, and you, poor hero of the sea, are trudging home in a tunic that smells like fish, sweat, bronze, and one extremely unlucky fig. Somewhere behind you, another group of returning sailors stumbles through the city gate. You hear them attempting a victory chant, but it fades quickly into confused mumbling and a spirited debate over who actually landed the decisive blow. Spoiler, it was probably gravity. You don't engage. You're busy. Busy avoiding puddles, navigating market goats, and trying not to look too heroic because, oddly enough, being visibly heroic first thing in the morning is a good way to get stuck hauling amphorae for your uncle. Again. And besides, your body isn't interested in glory right now. It's interested in soup and maybe a blanket, preferably one without fleas. The Agra looms ahead. It's still quiet at this hour, but already you can hear merchants setting up their stalls. Someone's arguing over radish prices. Someone else is roasting something that smells like it might once have been squid. A group of teenagers is drawing rude shapes in the dirt with sticks. A dog is asleep in the center of the square, sprawled like a philosopher who's just given up trying to understand anything. And you? You're walking through it all like a minor legend who hasn't quite decided if he wants to be remembered yet. You pass a potter, old Eucles, who squints at your sea-stained tunic and says, "Back so soon? Did you win?" You blink at him. "Well," you say, "I'm not dead." He nods solemnly. "That counts." Then he offers you a small cup of warm barley water, which you accept with all the reverence of someone being handed a goblet of ambrosia. Historians still argue whether Greek naval campaigns were actually efficient in their outcomes, or simply a display of elaborate civic participation with an excellent excuse for shouting and heroic posing. Some suggest many of these battles were more akin to splashy festivals of political tension than decisive combat. Others counter that the cost in lives, ships, and sandals says otherwise. But to you, right now, that debate means nothing. You're trying to walk without limping. Your thigh muscles feel like cheese that has been overinterpreted by poets. And you've just realized your sandals are missing. Again, you stop, look down, bare feet, covered in dirt, bruises, and something you're choosing not to identify. This is the third time you've lost your sandals in a military operation. Once during a naval drill, once during a goat-related incident outside Thebes. And now, somewhere between boarding a trireme and crawling off the enemy deck, they've vanished, evaporated into the ancient ether. You consider turning around. Then you remember the sea, number, not today. Instead, you keep walking, slower now. You pass by the temple of Hermes, where someone has very clearly overslept their incense duties. The statue is still smiling, though, as if to say, "I, too, have faked my way through many assignments." You nod at the god. You feel seen. Ahead, you spot your home. The door is crooked. The roof leaks. And the potted thyme plant you meant to water last week is now hosting a minor bee republic. but it's yours. And inside, hopefully, is soup. As you approach, you hear the unmistakable clatter of dishes and the low, comforting voice of your grandmother arguing with a loaf of bread. She opens the door just as you raise your fist to knock. Her eyes scan you once. "You smell like a wet statue," she says. "Accurate," you reply. She hands you a rag and points to the basin. "You're not stepping on my floor until you scrub those feet." You obey, of course. Heroes, after all, are still grandsons. You finally collapse onto the stool near the fire. She ladles out something warm, lentil stew with suspiciously few lentils, and sets down a cracked clay cup of wine. The good kind. Well, the slightly less diluted kind. You take a sip, exhale, and feel your soul re-enter your body. The stew is mostly broth and root vegetables, but it tastes like triumph. Even if you're still barefoot, even if your back feels like it was used as a chariot test track, even if no one sings songs about the man who rode moderately well and only fell over once during a boarding maneuver, you eat in silence. And for the first time all day, you smile. Later that day, though day is a generous term for what feels like the fifth hour of a very long dream, you find yourself summoned. Not to battle, thankfully, but to the training yard behind the temple. The strategoi, or generals, have called a debriefing. Why? No one's quite sure. Perhaps to explain what just happened, perhaps to take credit, or perhaps just to show off their latest tunics, freshly ironed and suspiciously clean for men who supposedly witnessed the fire of Poseidon's wrath. You go anyway, because missing a debrief can get you stuck cleaning the goat pens again, and those goats never forget. You arrive at the yard with a few dozen other weary souls. Everyone looks like they've recently escaped a soup pot. One man's armor is held together with fig paste. Another is missing half a sandal and has replaced it with woven onion skin. No one asks questions. The strategoi stand at the front under a striped awning, all plume and posture. Their helmets gleam. Their sandals are polished, their hands suspiciously uncalloused. You look down at your own hands, still blistered from rowing, crusted with a substance you hope is just dried seawater. You resist the urge to raise one and ask the most pressing question: did you even get on a boat? Instead, you listen. The main general, let's call him Plumis, because he looks like a man named Plumis, steps forward with a scroll. "Men," he begins, dramatically unrolling it, "we write today into the scrolls of history." You hope the scroll is long, because the story is going to need some serious editing. Plumis continues, "Our tactical brilliance at sea has once again outmatched the enemy. Our ramming maneuver was flawless." At this, someone behind you coughs loudly in the universal tone of absolutely not. "Our boarding tactics? Heroic." Someone mutters, "I fell off the ladder twice." "Our formation is precise and fearsome." You raise an eyebrow. That formation involved at least one ship spinning in slow circles and another ramming the wrong side. But the general isn't here for feedback. He's here to flourish. Historians still argue over just how accurate post-battle debriefings were in ancient Greece. Some claim they served a strategic function, analyzing weaknesses, planning improvements. Others believe they were more like political theater, filled with exaggerated metaphors and phrases like resounding triumph and glorious resolve, usually followed by a generous serving of goat stew and wine. Today's performance leans toward the latter. The generals take turns speaking. One refers to the sea as our eternal partner in conquest. Thank the gods, even though everyone knows he regularly skips temple offerings. One even brings out a diagram crudely painted on wood, showing ship positions in abstract swirls that look suspiciously like a chicken trying to write poetry in the sand. Eventually, the speeches end. No one claps. Everyone just exhales in that exhausted, culturally respectful way that says, "Thank you for the performance. Please never summon us again." But then something strange happens. They start giving out awards. Not medals, those aren't a thing yet. No, the ancient Greek navy prefers more symbolic gestures. The golden fig of valor, the polished sandal of endurance. A particularly wrinkled man receives a garland of herbs for exemplary yelling. You, somehow, are called forward. You stand there blinking in confusion while Plumis reads from the scroll. For exhibiting moderate composure during chaotic naval conflict, and for successfully retrieving a borrowed shield from enemy hands, we bestow upon you the feather of lucid bravery. He pulls out a feather. It's not golden. It's not particularly large. It may or may not have been plucked from the chicken that attacked someone on deck earlier. You accept it. Everyone cheers politely. The feather wilts slightly in your hand. After the debrief, the generals disappear into the temple for important strategic prayer, which likely involves cheese. The rest of you wander back towards the agora, feather tucked awkwardly into your belt. The man next to you, still sticky from the sea, glances sideways. Lucid bravery, huh? You shrug. I was mostly just trying not to vomit on the oar. Still counts. And it does. In the city, everything counts if said confidently enough. As you re-enter the bustling square, you're greeted by a new sight. A group of local youths has already begun reenacting your victory. Sort of. They've turned 2 carts into triremes, tied aprons to their heads as helmets, and are yelling dramatic commands while chasing each other in slow-motion circles. One has painted an owl on his chest in blue chalk and is demanding tribute from a goat. The goat looks unimpressed. You stop to watch. One child flings himself dramatically onto the cobblestones, clutching a sponge as if it were a sword. "Tell my wife," he gasps, "that I fought bravely against the sea." Another responds, "You don't have a wife, Lysander." "I could have," he retorts. You laugh. A real laugh this time. You don't stop them. Let them imagine it as they like. Let it be grand. Let it be silly. Maybe in 20 years, one of them will actually row into battle and realize how few things actually go to plan, and how many great acts of valor involve just not falling over. You walk home through the smell of olives, salt, and overacting. Your feather flutters softly in the breeze. Back at home, you try to sleep. You really do. But your body has other plans. Every muscle is arguing with the concept of horizontal rest. Your back wants to sit. Your legs want to float. Your arms would like to detach entirely and live a quiet life as decorative wall hooks. You shift on the straw mattress, groaning slightly. Your grandmother's cat, a feral thing named Amphitrite, climbs onto your chest and begins kneading your sternum with her claws, possibly in celebration or punishment. So you lie there, eyes half closed, remembering the collision, the shouting, the oars creaked like haunted violins, the enemy soldier who tried to poke you with the blunt end of a spear, the fig that mysteriously reappeared in your tunic pocket halfway through the fight. You sigh. It's strange, the things that stay with you after a battle. Not the big strokes of glory. Not the decisive moments. Plumas blathered on about. But the smell of tar in the water, the way your sandals vanished without a trace, the ridiculous doomed goose chase of figuring out who was actually in charge. You wonder if your name will appear in any of the records. You suspect not. But maybe, just maybe, someone will mention the barefoot guy who didn't scream during the ramming. You'd settle for that. Eventually, hunger wins. You roll off the mattress, shake Amphitrite off your chest, she hisses in Greek, and shuffle toward the kitchen nook. Your grandmother has left out a bit of stale bread, some olives, and a wedge of something that might be cheese or might be soap. You eat all of it, carefully. The sun is hanging low now, casting a pink hue across the tile floor. Outside, the city is glowing like a baked fig. You can hear laughter drifting in from a courtyard, neighbors gathering for dinner. Someone's burning incense. Someone else is burning dinner. Your feet carry you out the door before you even think about it, because there's one more thing you want to do before nightfall. You head toward the cliffs. There's a path that winds past the vineyard, then up past the old olive grove, where the trees are so gnarled they look like they're whispering secrets to each other. You know the way well. Every child in your city climbs this path at some point, usually on a dare or while chasing a goat. But today, you go alone. The climb is slow, not because it's steep, but because your legs are still recovering from rowing several thousand completely unnecessary meters. You reach the top just as the sky starts turning that perfect blue gold of a Greek evening. Below you, the sea, calm, unbothered, utterly indifferent. And that's when it hits you, how absurd it all is. Dozens of ships, hundreds of men, days of training, hours of rowing, gallons of sweat and spilled stew. And for what? A rickety sea dance in splintering boats over a patch of water nobody even owns. Historians still argue whether these battles ever truly resolved anything, whether cities stopped fighting afterward, or simply paused long enough to repair their hulls and mislabel their shields again. Some scrolls say yes, some say no. One, intriguingly, just contains a long drawing of angry dolphins and a badly spelled complaint about wet tunics. You don't know the truth. You just know the sea didn't care. Not during the fighting. Not now. It rolls and sighs below you, shining under the fading light. A few gulls drift lazily overhead. One squawks, then lands beside you, staring at your feet. Still no sandals. The gull stares harder. You look away. From up here, the city looks soft, safe. The chaos of the agora, the clutter of the docks, the crooked geometry of rooftops, all of it folds into something oddly serene. You imagine your grandmother down there, probably telling Amphitrite stories about how boys these days don't know how to take a proper sword blow. You sit on a rock, the same one you sat on when you were a kid pretending to be Theseus. Back then, you imagined the sea held monsters. Now you know it holds soggy men in armor and one very confused chicken. Same difference. As the last light slips behind the hills, you pull out the feather of lucid bravery. You hold it up, let it catch the wind. It flutters, trembles, and then floats away, dancing down the cliffside in soft, ridiculous spirals. You smile, because you know somehow that's exactly how it's supposed to go. You stand, and you walk home barefoot under the stars, guided by the scent of thyme and roasting fish, knowing the sea will always be there, and you'll be ready next time, maybe with shoes, maybe not. Morning comes too soon. It always does when you've had an adventure, especially the kind that leaves bruises in places you didn't know could bruise. You wake to the sound of a rooster crowing, which feels deeply ironic considering you just spent an entire day trying not to drown. Amphitrite is asleep on your face. You gently relocate her to your feet, where she promptly takes offense and jumps off the bed entirely. You sit up, slowly. The floor is cool against your toes. Outside, the street is already stirring. Merchants calling prices, children laughing, someone somewhere angrily shouting at a donkey. You stretch your arms overhead, and every joint creaks like a neglected temple door. Your grandmother pops her head in. "Your friend is here," she says. "I have a friend," you ask, genuinely surprised. She raises an eyebrow. "The one who rows badly and sings worse." "Ah, Stelios." You step outside, and there he is, leaning against your doorframe with the relaxed confidence of someone who did exactly nothing after the battle and still got thanked by name during the debrief. "Morning, sea beast," he grins. "Morning, oar skipper," you reply. He tosses something to you. You catch it instinctively. It's a sandal. "Yours?" he asks. You look at it. It's left-footed, slightly chewed on one strap, smells vaguely of goat. "Yes," you sigh. "One of them." He shrugs. "Figured I'd start returning pieces. I'm finding bits of our gear all over the city. Somebody's helmet was hanging from a statue's nose, and the bakery's cat is now sleeping in someone's shield." You laugh. It hurts. Everything hurts. But it's still funny. You and Stelios walk through the market together. It's busy now, bouncing with life. The chaos of naval warfare already feels like it happened in another lifetime, or maybe a particularly vivid fever dream. People nod to you as you pass. Not in awe. This isn't the Iliad, but with a sort of sleepy respect. There goes one of the lads who came back. You see the children again, still playing their makeshift sea battle game. The carts now have flags. One of them has created an elaborate sea creature costume from laundry and broom handles. It chases the others around the fountain. You and Stelios pause to watch. "They think we fought sea monsters," Stelios says. "Didn't we?" you reply. He considers. "I mean, one guy had a tattoo of a squid. That counts." You wander past the Temple of Athena, where a group of elders is deep in debate. Something about whether to repair the northern wall of the city now, or wait until the next invasion, or fiscal quarter, or a wine festival. It's hard to tell. They barely glance at you. One of them nods vaguely. You're not offended. Your kind rowers, foot soldiers, men who fall in the sea and survive, aren't made for statues. You're made for bruises and stew and long walks with aching feet. Still, someone had to row the boat, and row it well enough to get back. At the agora, you find the fishmonger has set up a tribute display. Nothing formal, but a basket of sea bream with a carved sign that reads, "In honor of our mildly victorious navy." You squint at the lettering. "I think mildly was unnecessary," you murmur. Stelios grins. "I think it's generous." You keep walking past stalls selling honeycomb and goat cheese and spiced olives. The olive seller gives you a sly look and presses 2 into your hand for free. "For surviving," she whispers. It might be the most touching thing you've received all week. Historians still argue whether returning soldiers in ancient Greece were celebrated or simply folded back into daily life. Some cities gave formal welcomes. Others offered quiet nods and slightly better portions at dinner. But for the average sailor, especially those who didn't die dramatically, recognition came in smaller ways. A full bowl, a soft bed, the smell of bread bacon without interruption. You and Stelios find a bench under an olive tree and sit. The stone is warm. Your legs are not impressed with this choice. So, he says, think they'll send us out again? You sigh. They always do. He nods. Next time I'm hiding in a basket. Next time I'm charging extra. You sit in silence for a while, watching the clouds. A bird lands nearby. It's carrying a piece of parchment in its beak. Stelios squints. Maybe it's a message. You both watch as it drops the parchment onto someone's lunch and flies away. You shrug. Probably an omen. Good or bad. Depends on the lunch. Eventually, you part ways. He heads toward the gymnasium, where men pretend to train and mostly gossip. You wander home, sandals flopping with each step. The one he returned doesn't quite match the one you found by the fountain, but together they make a pair, of sorts. You pass the mural at the city gates. It's old, faded, and now updated with a few fresh strokes of paint. A trireme, vaguely rendered, with heroic figures drawn far too tall and far too dry. Someone's already telling stories. In the sea? The sea is quiet today, but you know better. Midday finds you back at the harbor, not because anyone asked you to return, but because, like it or not, the sea has a way of pulling you back. It's not calling you exactly. It doesn't sing or whisper or lure. It just exists, unbothered, stretching out beyond the masts and crates and gulls, beyond yesterday's skirmish and today's chores. There's a calmness to it now, the kind that makes you wonder if it even remembers what happened out there. Spoiler, it doesn't. You sit on a barrel, watching the crews fuss over repairs. Ropes are being retied, hulls retarred, and one man is yelling at a stubborn octopus that refuses to leave his anchor. You sip from a clay cup of watered wine and let the sun soak into your shoulders. Then you hear it. Did we win? The question floats across the dock like a lost hat on the breeze. It comes from a boy, maybe 10 years old, pointing at one of the battered triremes, bobbing sadly in the water. The man, he's asking a sailor with arms like tree trunks and a beard that looks like it once wrestled a lion, pauses. He stares at the ship. Then he says, "Depends on whom you ask." And you smile. Because yes, that's exactly right. You start to notice the talk. Little fragments of the story swirling around the docks, the market, the workshops. And not just from the men who were there. Everyone's telling it now. But no two versions match. In one tale, your fleet defeated 50 ships with nothing but clever tactics and a gust of divine wind. In another, a single trireme performed a spectacular double ram, which, as far as you know, is physically impossible. Someone insists a dolphin swam alongside the lead ship and sang a battle hymn. Someone else claims to have seen Poseidon himself, frowning from the shallows. It's all nonsense, of course, but it's delicious nonsense. You pass two men seated at a tavern doorway. And then I leapt from their deck onto ours, one says grandly, with 2 swords in hand and a shield on my back. You recognize him. He was unconscious for most of the return journey. His companion nods solemnly. Amazing. And then what? Well, the first man pauses. Then I slipped on a fish, but heroically. You keep walking. Further along, an artist is sketching on a fragment of pottery. He's carving a battle scene into the clay rows of perfect oars, noble faces, triumphant poses. No one is vomiting. No one is barefoot. It's practically unrecognizable. He glances up at you and gestures. You were there, yes? Did they really fire flaming arrows? You blink. No one had been flaming anything. We barely had dry wood. He frowns. But flaming arrows look better. You sigh. Then sure, flaming arrows, lots of them, some in the shape of dolphins. His eyes light up. Ooh, symbolic. Historians still argue whether the popular stories that followed Greek battles were part of civic myth-making or just tavern-born exaggerations. But the truth is, people like stories, even if they're half-lies wrapped in smoke. And once enough people start telling the same version, well, suddenly it becomes history, or something like it. You stop near the main notice board where a crier is nailing up a new scroll. You read over his shoulder. Heroic naval defense saves trade route. Bold letters, no detail. But the message is clear. Your city feels proud of itself. You wonder if the city ever really knows what happens at sea, or if it just writes the version that makes the fish taste better. You don't mind, though. Not really, because you're here, and you remember. You sit by the edge of the dock now, legs dangling over the water. You watch the waves roll in the same rhythm as always. You lean forward and peer at your reflection. Sunburned nose, salt-frizzed hair. One eyebrow is slightly higher than the other. A man who rode, slipped, got yelled at, and survived. Did you win? You don't know. But you came back. That has to count for something. The breeze picks up. A gull lands beside you, its feet slapping softly on the wood. It stares at you. You stare back. Then it hops closer. You freeze. It picks something up with its beak, something wedged between the planks. A figel mesteto, an actual figure. You blink. It drops it at your feet, then takes off again. You stare at the offering, then you eat it. Because why not? You've earned stranger things. You head back into town, passing more people, more stories, more laughter. You overhear one version of the battle that now includes a sea monster, 3 goats, and a surprise musical number. You let them have it. Because the truth, that's yours. Tucked away. Quiet. Salt-washed and blister-covered. But real. Afternoon slides in like a sleepy cat. Warm, silent, and unapologetically in the way. You should probably be helping with something. Carrying amphorae. Fixing nets. Sharpening that one sword that doubled as a soup ladle yesterday. But instead, you're sitting in the shade, outside a modest taverna, sipping what the owner swears is wine, but what your taste buds have filed under grape-related mystery liquid. You're not alone. A small gathering of fellow sailors has slowly collected around the taverna's one wobbly table, drawn by the promise of fermented beverages and an unspoken agreement that nobody's allowed to talk about rowing technique. Yet somehow, they do. That oar was cursed, one man declares. Every stroke, I felt it judging me. Another replies, I was seated next to a man who rowed like he was playing a harp. It was spiritual and completely useless. You all nod. This is healing. A pot of something vaguely stew-like is passed around. You ladle a few spoonfuls into a chipped bowl and inhale steam that smells of lentils, onions, and the philosophical concept of meat. You chew slowly, carefully, one eye still on your spoon just in case anything moves. It's not bad, or maybe you're just too tired to care. The conversation drifts like a trireme with no drummer. From battle stories to local gossip to deeply questionable theories about why goats never get seasick. Eventually, the topic inevitably settles on payment. Has anyone never actually been paid yet? Someone asks. Everyone goes silent. A few heads shake. One man mutters, I got a feather. You raise a hand. Same. Collective sigh. Apparently, valor in this city is currently being compensated in poultry parts. Historians still argue about the pay system for Greek naval forces. Some believe it was fair. a small daily wage, regular distributions of spoils, and public honors. Others point out how often those wages turned out to be promises written on scrolls that mysteriously vanished during treasury audits. Today, you're leaning toward the latter theory. A scribe had promised to record everyone's names. For the archives, he said, while chewing on a reed pen and asking how to spell heroism. You distinctly remember him skipping yours. It doesn't matter. You doubt you'd recognize it in the scrolls anyway. Your name gets mangled more often than a fish in a wrestling match. You push back from the table and stand, stretching with a wince. There's talk of a procession, some kind of informal thanks from the marketplace. But you decide to skip it. Why? Because there's a bathhouse nearby. And rumor has it, warm water. You walk there slowly, savoring the idea. The streets are full now. Kids running. Vendors shouting. The whole city leaning into the afternoon like a drunk philosopher on a cushion. You pass the bakery, where the baker's son waves a burnt loaf at you like a sword. I am the general of yeast, he declares. You salute him. He nods solemnly, then drops the bread. The bathhouse is quiet. Dim light filters in through high, cracked windows. Steam curls upward from the pool. There's a faint scent of herbs and something vaguely metallic. You peel off your tunic with the hesitation of a man unsure whether fabric should ever make that noise. You lower yourself into the water inch by inch, each joint protesting, each muscle sighing, until finally you sink in fully and exhale like a man returning to the womb. This is heaven, or something adjacent to it. No oars, no yells, no gulls, just steam, silence, and the distant drip of water against tile. You close your eyes, float a little, let your mind wander. You think of the sea again, of the way it shimmered just before dawn, the way your ship shuddered on impact, the strange quiet that settled in the middle of the fight, the shared nods between enemies, the figure, the goat. You think of how everyone always talks about glory, but no one talks about the moment right after a battle when you're not quite dead, but not really alive either, just floating in between, waiting for your breath to come back, waiting for your body to remember it belongs to you. Maybe this is why baths matter, not just for the dirt, but for the remembering. A voice pulls you back. Don't fall asleep, says the attendant, a wiry man with a towel over his shoulder. People drown that way, and I hate paperwork. You grunt in agreement and rise, water streaming down your back. He hands you a towel that feels like it's been around since the first Olympic Games. You dry off slowly, then slip on your tunic. Still damp, still stained, but now at least slightly less offensive. As you exit, he calls after you. You were on one of the triremes, right? You pause. Yeah. He nods. My brother was too. Says you all fought like confused lions. Proud of you. You smile. Tell him thanks. You leave the bathhouse with lighter steps. Maybe you're still unpaid. Maybe your name is missing from the scrolls. But someone remembers. And somehow, that feels heavier than gold. The city feels quieter now. Not silent exactly, but softer around the edges. As if the sun, at last, had convinced everyone to slow down just a little. You're walking through familiar streets, the kind you could follow in your sleep. The cracked tiles, the uneven steps, the stone bench outside the bakery that always smells faintly of burnt sesame and overconfidence. Your body still aches from the inside out. You're no longer soaked thanks to the bathhouse, but somehow the weariness clings to you like a second skin. It's the kind of tired that no nap can fix. It settles behind your eyes and your shoulder blades, deep in your knees. And yet, there's peace here. The battle is behind you. The sea, for once, is not pulling you toward anything. You pass a group of boys arguing over who was the bravest sailor in the battle. One of them insists he saw his cousin leap from one ship to another while juggling a sword and a loaf of bread. Another claims he saw a man fight off 3 enemy soldiers with only a ladle. You keep walking. Let them tell it how they like. They need heroes. You're not going to take that from them. As you cross into the agora, you see a small gathering near the notice board. Someone's reading aloud from a freshly posted scroll, the kind that always begins with, "Hear ye," and ends with someone being slightly exaggerated into legend. And though the odds were dire, the crier declares, "Our city's brave defenders rode through storm and shadow, guided by wisdom, discipline, and the favor of the gods." You raise an eyebrow. There was no storm. And the only guidance came from a commander who couldn't tell his left from port. But the crowd loves it. They listen, wide-eyed. There are murmurs of pride, a few quiet gasps when he mentions an unexpected sea creature, and even a laugh when the scroll notes a heroic act involving a well-timed sneeze. You inch closer, just as the voice booms out, and though many names were lost in the chaos, one unnamed oarsman remained calm, brave, and essential, his role unspoken, but not forgotten. You freeze. They mean you. Maybe, or maybe not, but you let yourself believe it, just for a moment. Unnamed, but remembered. You head home with the words still echoing in your chest, tucked behind your ribs like a small glowing stone. The sky is gold, fading into blue. The wind carries the smell of thyme, charcoal, and someone's overly ambitious fish stew. Your grandmother is outside waiting for you. "You missed lunch?" she says, arms crossed, expression unreadable. "I was at the bathhouse." "You still smell like a fisherman's sandal," she mutters, but she tosses you a folded tunic anyway. It's your good one, the one without stains or mystery burns. You don't ask how she got the seawater smell out. You're afraid the answer might involve ancient curses or vinegar. You eat dinner with her in the kitchen alcove, seated on the worn bench beneath the faded mural of Athena. The food is humble: lentils, a wedge of barley bread, and soft goat cheese with a hint of lemon. You chew slowly, gratefully. Halfway through the meal, she pauses, looks over at you. "You know," she says, "your father came back from the sea once, looking just like that, tired, bruised, too proud to admit he was scared." You glance at her. She doesn't speak of your father often. And when she does, her words feel like pebbles, skipping across deep water, brief, but meaningful. "He was on a ship like yours," she continues. "Same kind of fight, same kind of return." You nod quietly. Somehow this comforts you more than the bath, more than the wine, more than the half-true stories in the square. You're not the first to come back like this, and maybe you won't be the last. Later, you sit by the window, legs tucked up, a small clay cup of wine cradled in your hands. The moon is rising. The stars flicker like faint torches in the heavens. Outside, the city has gone quiet again. Lamps are being extinguished, doors drawn shut. A few stray dogs bark in the distance, then go silent. You hear the distant hush of waves curling up against the harbor walls. And just like that, the weight of the day settles fully in your chest. Not heavy, just present. You think of the fight, of your hands on the oar, the moment you stepped onto the enemy ship, your heart pounding, sword shaking in your palm. You think of the man who tried to shout something brave but tripped instead, of the fig tucked in your tunic, of the gull who made eye contact just before the ram. You think of the sea. How does it not remember? It doesn't need to. You do. That's enough. Somewhere in the darkness, Amphitrite jumps up onto your lap. She purrs once, settles in, and together you watch the night lean into itself. The city sleeps, the harbor sighs, and you, sailor, survivor, oarsman unnamed, sit still for once, knowing that the story will keep spinning without you. But you were in it. You were part of it. And you came home. You wake to find your sandals missing. Again. It's becoming a theme. You'd laugh, but your feet are already sore just thinking about another day barefoot across sun-heated stones and the occasional, inevitable fig pit. You check under the cot. Nothing. You check beside the door. Just a pile of Amphitrite's personal collection of dead leaves, string, and what might be a lizard's tail. You sigh. You are a battle-tested oarsman of a mighty Greek trireme, a man who faced chaos at sea, stared death in the eye, well, squinted at it, and returned to tell the tale. And yet, you can't keep a pair of sandals for more than 24 hours. Your grandmother enters the room, wiping her hands on her apron. She eyes your bare feet. Again? You nod. She says nothing, but there's a pause that feels louder than any speech. Then, with an expression equal to parts judgment and maternal exhaustion, she slides something across the floor with her toe. A pair of worn sandals. Not yours. Definitely older. Possibly once belonged to your grandfather. You look up. Try not to lose these. They've already survived 2 wars, 3 festivals, and a goat chase. You slip them on. They're big, lumpy, but warm. They'll do. You step outside into a city still stretching itself awake. Merchants are setting up their stalls, street dogs slinking between columns. A group of teenage boys playing a makeshift game with a walnut shell and a lot of rules that change mid-sentence. One of them stops and salutes you dramatically. "Oarsman of legend!" he cries. "Did you really board the enemy ship using only your elbows?" You blink. "What?" He nods seriously. "That's what Miklos said. He heard it from his cousin. You elbowed your way across and knocked down 3 men before landing in a barrel." You stare, then smile. "Well," you say, "that barrel hit back." The kids erupt in awe. One begins by imitating your imaginary move by throwing oneself face first onto the ground. You keep walking. At the marketplace, things are livelier. There's a new scroll posted on the wall, some kind of honor roll or official recognition list. You wander over, mostly curious if anyone got your name even close to right this time. You scan the names. Themistocles, nope. Eurython, definitely not. Eudoros, close, but no. That's Eudoros the potter. And you're pretty sure he hasn't left his workshop in 2 years. You finally spot something that stops you. Unidentified naval oarsman exceptionally calm under pressure. That's it. That's you. Has to be. You tilt your head. Someone's doodled a trireme next to it. It looks like a loaf of bread with angry oars. You don't mind. Historians still argue whether ancient Greek cities were genuinely interested in honoring the common man or merely enjoyed pretending they were. The myth of equality of every citizen sailor having their moment of glory is strong. But the scrolls rarely name the rowers, the fighters, the fig dodgers. Still, being unnamed but mentioned, that's something. And truth be told, the men who make it into marble statues rarely have to explain where their sandals went. You move towards the olive vendor, mostly because she gives the best samples. She spots you, waves a wooden spoon, and says, "You look better." Less like something the sea coughed up. You grin. "I'm working on it." She hands you a small olive stuffed with something mysterious. You eat it without question. She gives you another. "You going back out?" she asks casually. You pause, "Are you?" "I don't know," you say honestly. She nods. "The sea always asks again." You thank her, pocket a few olives, and continue on. On your way home, you spot Stelios barefoot, shirtless, and balancing an amphora on his head while reciting terrible poetry to a very bored donkey. You approach. "Still a hero, I see," you say. He turns, grins. "I have been composing a tribute to our glorious battle," he announces. "So far, I have 3 verses about rowing and 1 about soup." Sounds accurate. He lowers the amphora to the ground with theatrical grace. "Did you hear? They're planning another naval show next week. Rumor is we're needed again." You sigh. "Already?" He shrugs. "Our city loves a dramatic exit, and an even more dramatic re-entry." You both sit on a low wall in the shade. Watch 2 cats chase each other across a tiled roof. Someone's flute echoes from a distant courtyard. "Would you go?" Stelios asks. You think about it, the sea, the wood, the shouting, the gulls. You close your eyes. "Maybe, if they fix the benches." He laughs. "Maybe if they serve soup first." You both laugh. Eventually, you part ways again. He goes off toward the gymnasium, still reciting rhyming couplets about triremes and sand. You head home, your grandfather's sandals slapping gently against the stone. You pass the mural again, the one being updated every day. The figures on the painted trireme now wear more dramatic expressions. One has a golden helmet. Another, curiously, appears to be juggling olives. You look closer. Someone's painted a tiny figure near the back. No helmet, no weapon, just rowing, just you. You touch the wall lightly, then walk on, back through the city, back through the warmth, back through the ordinary, which, after the sea, feels like the most extraordinary thing of all. You don't mean to exaggerate, but somehow, by the time dinner rolls around, you're halfway through retelling your sea battle story, and it's taken on a life of its own. It starts simply, just a quiet chat with your neighbor who stopped by to return a borrowed ladle, which you don't remember borrowing. You mention, casually, that yes, you were on one of the triremes. That yes, it was chaos. That's no, you didn't cry, at least not loud enough for anyone to hear. But then her cousin joins. Then her cousin's husband. Then someone from 2 houses down who heard Navy and immediately pulled up a stool. Next thing you know, you're in the middle of your courtyard with a bowl of olives, 1 cracked amphora of wine, and an audience leaning in like they've never heard a sea story in their lives. So you give them what they came for. The water, you say solemnly, was as dark as a philosopher's debts. The enemy approached fast, too fast, and we barely had time to shout before they were upon us. A gasp, you continue. The prow of our trireme, splintered but proud, crashed into theirs with the force of all Olympus behind it. Men shouted, shields clashed. 1 man tried to duel a gull. Someone drops their olive pit. You describe the boarding chaos, adding just enough flourish to keep it plausible. A shield deflection here, a daring leap there. You mention the gull again. It's now become a recurring character. And by the 3rd retelling, it has a name. Antheos. Someone brings bread. Someone else lights a lamp. The sky darkens around you, but the courtyard glows golden with firelight and wine and laughter. It's not the truth exactly, But it's not a lie either. You did row, you did fight, you did come home. And maybe the part about the dolphin helping push the ship was just a metaphor. Maybe. Your grandmother eventually appears, arms crossed, one eyebrow arched high enough to call down lightning. Have you told them about the part where you lost your sandals again? The group turns toward you. You raise a hand. I was being symbolic. She rolls her eyes and retreats, muttering something about young men and their heroic vegetables. Still, she leaves behind a tray of fig cakes. You know it's her way of saying, I'm listening. I'm glad you're home. Don't push your luck. Stelios arrives halfway through your story's fourth round. He stands in the shadows, arms crossed, grinning like a man who's heard both the actual events and your slightly theatrical retelling. When you mention the shimmering light of Apollo guiding our oars, he whistles softly. Is that what it was? I thought it was just lantern oil. You shoot him a glance. Do you want a fig cake or not? He shrugs. Carry on, bard of the brine. And so you do. Historians still argue over the value of oral tradition in ancient Greek life, how facts softened into fables, and fables into legends. But everyone agrees on one thing. Storytelling was survival. It preserved what scrolls ignored. It added color to the gray. It turned bruises into badges and lost sandals into punchlines. Around that courtyard fire, as the night deepens and the shadows grow longer, you begin to understand that for yourself. It's not about boasting. It's about remembering and making sure others remember too, even if the gull gets more heroic with each version. You pause after the latest retelling. Voice hoarse, fingers sticky with fig. Someone asks, what happened after you got back? You lean back. I was given a feather. Another laugh ripples through the group. A golden one. No, you say. Chicken, I think, slightly confused. There's a moment of silence, then full-on chuckling. Even Stelios wipes his eyes. You finish your wine. Much later, the group disperses. Lamps are snuffed. Breadcrumbs brushed off robes. Good nights whispered like old spells. Your neighbors drift back to their homes, still shaking their heads, still murmuring bits of your tale. You and Stelios remain in the courtyard. The stars are clear tonight. No clouds, just constellations, scattered like seeds from the hand of a generous god. You're enjoying this, aren't you? He asks. You glance at him. What? All of it. The retelling, the spotlight, you smile. I don't need the spotlight. But the laughter's nice. He nods. Well, if you want, I can add drums next time. Really punch up the dramatic bits. You pretend to consider. Only if you promise not to rhyme. No deal. You sit in silence for a while, listening to the distant waves. The sea is far away now, but it's never gone. It lives in the way you chew bread, the way your feet avoid puddles automatically, the way your hands twitch slightly when someone says the word or. It's there, and so are you. You wake the next morning to something deeply unsettling. Silence. No yelling. No fish carts. No philosophical arguments echoing from the bakery window. Just quiet. Gentle, eerie quiet. The kind that makes you wonder if you've slept through a council decree, or worse, a festival. You sit up slowly. Amphitrite blinks at you from the windowsill with the knowing expression of someone who's been up for hours and has already judged you for sleeping in. The sunlight is soft, filtered, still warming up to the day. You stretch, groan, and listen again. Still quiet. Too quiet. Then you hear it. The clink, clink, clink of metal on marble. followed by the distant, unmistakable squeal of a trumpet in distress. Uh-oh. You stand, peek out the front door, and there it is. A military parade. Or more accurately, a civic ceremony masquerading as one. A line of soldiers, fresh robes and all, marching stiffly toward the center of town. Behind them, musicians struggled to keep time. Behind them, a wagon carrying an enormous, poorly proportioned statue of a helmeted general you don't recognize, flanked by two boys frantically fanning it with laurel leaves. Your grandmother appears beside you, holding a half-peeled pomegranate. "More feathers than sense," she mutters, nodding at the procession. You nod in agreement. The lead general's headdress is taller than he is. A strong wind would take him halfway to Crete. You decide to follow. Not because you enjoy pomp, but because rumors fly faster than gulls, and you've already heard that today's event will include public recognition of naval contributors, and maybe, just maybe, a food offering table. You walk alongside the crowd, blending in. You spot some familiar faces, other rowers from your ship, now in marginally cleaner tunics. One has polished his helmet. Another has glued a decorative seashell to his shield. You resist the urge to laugh. You didn't prepare anything. You didn't know you needed to. You're wearing your best sandals, meaning the ones that match. That'll have to do. At the heart of the agora, a platform has been set up. Marble steps. A cluster of city officials in robes that have never seen salt water. They're already fanning themselves dramatically, whispering about scrolls and optics. A man in an embroidered cloak steps forward and taps a small bell. The crowd quiets. The speeches begin. You brace yourself. The orator starts with the usual litany of poetic flourishes. The glory of the polis, the courage of its people, the blessings of the gods. You tune most of it out until he starts listing names, actual names, of actual participants. You lean in. He names the captain, then the strategoi, then the man who donated the ropes, then the priest who accidentally blessed the wrong ship, but meant well. You hear Stelios's name, mispronounced but recognizable. You glance around. He's lounging on the edge of a barrel, chewing something green and looking smug. You wait, and wait, and then. And to all those unnamed who served with strength and discipline, whose strokes carried our ships, whose arms bore the burden, whose feet, though often unshod, walked back home in silence, we thank you. You feel something tighten in your chest. Unnamed. Again. But this time it doesn't feel small. It feels vast. Because he was talking about you and the others. The 100 hands that made the ship move. The men who didn't wear fancy cloaks or shout orders. The ones who rowed, who slipped, who didn't flee. The ones who came back. After the speeches, the offerings are brought out. Not gold, not medals, but baskets of fruit, loaves of dark bread, small jars of honey and oil, symbols, nourishment, something real. You stand in line with the others. A woman offers you a fig and a pat on the shoulder. A boy hands you a clay coin with a trireme carved into it, rough, clearly homemade. You turn it over in your hand, no inscription, no name. Just the shape of what you rode into battle. You smile and tuck it into your belt. Historians still argue about these ceremonies. Were they political theater? Of course. Were they sincere? Sometimes. But to you, standing there in the dust and heat, fig in hand, it doesn't really matter. Because the city saw you. Not all of you, not by name, but enough. You find Stelios again after the crowd thins. He tosses you a bread roll and says, "We're legends now." You raise an eyebrow. "We are?" He nods seriously. "Some kid drew me on a wall. I had 6 arms." You laugh. "Did he get your nose right?" "No." he says. Made it smaller, so I gave him an olive. You sit in the shade together, chewing in silence. You watch the ceremonial cart get wheeled away, the statue of the general wobbling dangerously. A gust of wind tilts it slightly. You both lean forward. It doesn't fall, yet. You stand. Your legs still ache. Your shoulders still twinge, but you feel steady. Stelios claps you on the back. So what now, sea hero? You think, and then say, lunch, a nap, and maybe, just maybe, I'll mend my sandals. He raises an eyebrow. Ambitious. You grin. Heroic. You walk back through the square barefoot, finally in matching shoes. Your clay trireme coin pressed against your hip. And somewhere behind you, a child yells, There goes the oarsman. The real one. You don't turn. You just keep walking. Because for the first time, the title doesn't feel borrowed. It fits. You don't head straight home. Something pulls you off course, a feeling more than a thought. Your feet take you down a familiar path without asking permission from the rest of your body. Past the baker's stall, where the loaves are puffed up like little shields. Past the gossiping weavers, who pause long enough to eye your sandals as if they might suddenly unravel on the spot. Past the cracked column where you once carved your name as a boy, now barely legible beneath years of chalk games and rain. You're going to the temple of Poseidon. You don't know why. Maybe to give thanks, maybe to glare, maybe just to stand in a space where the stone walls smell faintly of salt and burnt offerings, and the god of the sea might still be listening, or at least pretending to. The temple sits on a rise just above the harbor. From here, you can see the entire bay, the curve of the shoreline, the clustered ships bobbing lazily, the seabirds swirling overhead like feathery philosophers. The temple is smaller than you remember. Aren't they always? Grand in childhood, now only modest stone and patient pillars. A few fishermen lounge by the steps, arguing over nets and divine intervention. You nod as you pass. They nod back. No one asks questions. No one needs to. Inside, it's cool, quiet. The scent of old incense hangs in the air, sweet and faintly fishy. A few offerings lie at the god's feet. A shell necklace, a carved dolphin, a half-eaten fig. Someone's left a sandal. Of course they have. You approach the altar slowly. You don't kneel. You don't speak. You just stand there, arms crossed, looking up at the stylized stone face of the sea god carved into the wall. His beard is curled like waves. His eyes are wide, judging, maybe bored. You don't really know what you're supposed to feel. Gratitude? You didn't drown. You made it back. Annoyance? He didn't exactly make it easy. You settle on something in the middle. You reach into your belt and pull out the little clay coin, the one the boy gave you after the ceremony. You place it at the base of the altar, next to the fig and the sandal. Not because Poseidon needs another offering, but because maybe you do. Because maybe there's something oddly sacred in leaving behind a piece of the story. You stand there a moment longer, then turn and walk back out into the light. Outside, the wind has picked up. The sea shimmers under the late afternoon sun. The sky is open soft. Somewhere, a gull cackles, probably at you, or at everyone. You don't mind. You head back into town where the market's starting to wind down. You hear the clatter of carts, the closing of shutters. Someone is sweeping lentils into a basket while mumbling about last year's tax collection. A young man plays a flute while pretending not to look at a girl who is definitely not pretending to ignore him. And you? You're just walking. Quiet, unbothered. For the first time in days, the pace of the world seems to match your own. You cut through a narrow alley that opens into a quiet courtyard. An old fig tree stands in the center, bent but blooming. You sit beneath it, let your back rest against the trunk. Your feet ache in that dull, honest way that says you earned every step. You close your eyes, breathe, let it all settle. The rowing, the shouting, the splash of oars and the slam of wood, the cheer of the crowd and the silence of the bath, all of it curling into memory, not gone, just quieter. Historians rarely write about this part, the after, the long, slow return to ordinary life. They love the drama of battle, the stakes, the politics, the consequences, but they skip the next day and the one after, and the strange, delicate process of becoming a person again after you've been something else. You think of that now. You're not the same man who climbed onto the trireme, but you're still you. Only different, wider, deeper, like the sea after a storm. You hear footsteps, slight, careful. A child peeks into the courtyard. The same boy from earlier, the one who gave you the coin. He spots you and freezes, then awkwardly steps forward. "Mr. Oarsman?" he asks. You smile. "I suppose." He hesitates. "Can I ask something?" You nod. "Were you scared?" You pause. Not because you're unsure, but because no one's asked it out loud yet. "Yes," you say. He waits. "But I kept rowing anyway." He nods like he's memorizing it, then runs off. You watch him go. Then lean your head back and laugh. A short, quiet laugh. The kind that carries no weight, just air, just relief. Evening creeps in, slow and golden. You rise from the base of the fig tree. Your legs groan. Your back complains. But you walk anyway. You head home. This time with both sandals and the faintest hint of peace. You come home to music. Not the kind played by trained musicians, but the real, clumsy, glorious sort someone's aunt with a hand drum, a half-tuned lyre, and a cousin who thinks clapping offbeat is an inherited skill. It's pouring out from your neighbor's courtyard like honey spilled on stone. Laughter follows it and the smell of something being grilled far too ambitiously. You pause at your doorway. You could go inside, change into your least salty tunic, tend to your blisters, sleep. But instead you follow the music, because tonight feels light, and your body, battered though it is, wants to be near people again. It turns out to be a celebration. Of what no one seems sure, a return perhaps, or a harvest, or just an excuse to roast things over fire and pretend life is less exhausting than it really is. You're waved in before you can ask questions. Someone hands you a fig. Someone else puts a wreath on your head, grape leaves probably, maybe weeds, hard to tell in the dark. And then you're seated on a cushion that smells like 5 previous celebrations and a small barnyard animal. You don't care. The food comes in waves, flatbreads, olives, grilled onions, fish with far too many bones. You eat slowly, gratefully, one bite at a time. And then come the stories, not yours this time. Other men, other battles. Some are likely true, some are definitely not. There's a tale about a soldier who once won a duel using only a spoon. Another is about a general who got lost for 3 days in his own camp because he refused to ask for directions. You laugh so hard it hurts your ribs. Someone hands you a cup. Wine, water, or something in between. You drink, you lean back, you feel it. Not pride exactly, not relief, just belonging. Stelios finds you eventually. Of course he does. He arrives barefoot, shirt unbuttoned, holding a half-eaten fig tart like it's a prized relic from Delphi. "I thought you'd be home writing odes to your sandals." He grins. They're safe, you reply, for now. He flops onto the cushion beside you with the grace of a dropped amphora. You missed a dance-off earlier, he says. 2 old women and a goat. I'll let you guess who won. You nod solemnly. The goat. Obviously. You sit in silence for a while. The music swells. Someone starts singing a sweet nasal tune about sea winds and cracked oars. You don't recognize the words, but the rhythm feels familiar, like rowing, like waves, like home. The conversation drifts, as all good ones do. Stelios asks, "Do you remember that moment just before we hit their ship?" You nod. "Of course you do." You looked over and said, "What was it?" "I think we forgot to pray." You laugh. Number I said, "I think I left my sandals." He blinks. "Oh, that's actually worse." You both laugh. Again. It's easier tonight. The tension is gone. The adrenaline spent. The memory is now safe enough to poke at without bleeding. You sip from your cup. Around you, the party goes on. Someone dances. Someone drops a plate. Someone starts arguing about the best way to cook lentils and storms off when no one agrees. You close your eyes for a moment and just listen to music, to voices, to a city that has already moved on from the battle, but still, somehow, remembers. Historians don't write about nights like this. They write about strategy, about loss, about names carved into marble. But they miss the stories told on grape-stained cushions under fig trees. They miss the way a soldier lets his shoulders drop when he's no longer holding up a city's expectations. They miss the way your hand still moves like it's gripping an oar when you lift your cup. They miss this. And maybe that's all right. Maybe the best parts aren't meant to be archived, just lived. Later, when the embers have cooled and the guests are drifting home like sleepy stars, you walk back through quiet streets with Stelios. He's humming. You're not. You're just thinking. About how close the sea feels, even now. About how small your city looks when you're rowing away from it. About how strange it is to miss something you barely survived. You stop at the corner where your roads split. He turns to you. Next time they ask for volunteers, he says, "Will you go?" You don't answer right away. Because truth lives in silence, too. You look up at the stars, at the sky that once arched over a battle you're still making sense of. Then you smile. "Only if they let me bring better sandals." He chuckles. "Fair." You part ways. Your feet are sore. Your tunic is stained. Your heart is full. Back in your doorway you pause. The house is dark, quiet. Amphitrite is curled in the window, tail twitching, eyes half closed. You step inside. And for the first time since the battle, you feel no need to retell it. Because tonight wasn't about what happened. It was about what stayed. The next morning arrives slowly. And for once, it doesn't demand anything from you. No horns, no drums, no sandals gone missing. Just light creeping across your floorboards like a polite guest. And the faint sound of your grandmother already in the kitchen humming to a pot of something far more promising than battlefield lentils. You lie still for a while, savoring the strangeness of rest. Your body, usually a collection of complaints and creaks, is quiet. Not healed, but content. Like it knows you've earned this moment. Eventually you rise. You pull on your now famous sandals, both still present, both still functional, and shuffle into the kitchen, where a bowl of warm barley porridge is waiting for you. Your grandmother gestures at the seat across from her without looking up. Eat before the porridge gets ideas. You sit, eat, say nothing. She doesn't ask about the parade, the ceremony, or the night of fig-stained music. She just passes you more porridge. It's enough. After breakfast, you step outside, only to find the city is already talking about something else. That's the thing about Athens or Corinth or Aegina or whatever polis you happen to belong to. It moves fast. One day, you're the oarsman of the hour. Next, a foreign diplomat arrives with a goat that speaks in grunts, suspiciously resembling prophecy. And suddenly, everyone's forgotten how brave you were on a boat, held together by wet string and shared panic. You walk through the agora as vendors shout about spice shipments and rumors of a new play debuting soon in the theater district. A comedy, allegedly, involving 3 missing helmets and 1 extremely angry priest. It's fine. You're not bitter, mostly. At the fountain, you find 2 men arguing about the exact angle needed to ram an enemy ship without splintering your own. One has a stick, the other has a fig, neither has a trireme. You pause, listen, and eventually can't help yourself. Try angling off the stern next time, you say casually. They blink. Were you there? The one with the fig asks. You nod. Rowed 3rd bench on the starboard side. They look at each other, then immediately ask you 17 contradictory questions, including, did you see Poseidon? Did the enemy bleed purple? Did a man really fight off 2 invaders with a broken oar and a sneeze? You answer what you can. Then leave before someone challenges you to a reenactment. You find yourself wandering again, not towards the docks, not toward the temple, but toward the edge of the city, where the land meets the olive groves, and the air smells like dust, old wood, and the faint sweetness of sun-warmed leaves. There's a stone bench there, cracked, but still standing. You sit, close your eyes, and remember, not the noise, not the speeches, just the moments in between, the splash of oars, the steady breath before impact, the silent nods between strangers in matching helmets, the unspoken agreement to survive. Historians still debate the inner lives of the common Greek soldier. Scrolls are full of the generals, the heroes, the ones who spoke with gods or invented new formations with names like the hammered dolphin or reverse owl. But you wonder, who remembered the man on the oar bench with no plume on his helmet and a blister under every finger? You remember him. You were him. You are him. Someone passes by on the path behind you, a traveler, maybe, or just a bored shepherd looking for his best goat. He pauses when he sees you. Were you one of them? He asks. You shrug. If them had salt in their boots and a fig in their tunic, then yes. He smiles. My brother was on the other ship, the one you rammed. You tense just slightly. He's fine, the man adds quickly. Bruised, missing a sandal, but fine. You nod. The man lingers, then says, he told me he saw someone rowing through the whole thing without flinching. Said he watched him the whole time, just trying to keep pace. You say nothing. He said that man helped him feel less afraid. You look out toward the sea, still and blue and far away. You don't know what to say to that, so you just nod, and the man walks on. You sit a while longer, long enough for the sun to shift, long enough to start feeling hungry again. You rise slowly, brush the dust from your tunic, and walk back through the olive trees toward the city that's already moved on, but still has space for you in its quiet corners and crooked streets. When you reach your home, there's a package by the door, wrapped in cloth, tied with twine. You bring it inside, curious. Open it. Inside, a new pair of sandals. Well made, soft leather, balanced, no note. just a small carved tag hanging from the strap. A simple trireme. No name, no glory, just the boat, just the oars. You smile. And for the first time since returning from the sea, you feel ready to walk. You wear the new sandals the next day, not because the old pair failed, but because there's something about a gift with no name that makes it feel heavier than gold. They fit well, almost too well, as if whoever made them knew how your feet press forward just slightly on hills, how the left toe bends differently than the right after years of rowing, and how your soles prefer soft tread over style. You take them out into the city like a quiet offering, not to show them off, but to break them in, to see how they move under real sun, real dust, real fig peels squished underfoot. You don't have a plan for the day, and that's new. For the first time in weeks, no one's shouting orders at you. No drums, no gulls cackling orders from the sky. Just the gentle rhythm of your own pace, the faint creak of leather with each step, and a city that doesn't need you to row today. And yet it still remembers. You reach the docks by mid-morning, just as a fresh trireme is being prepared. This one gleams fresh tar, polished bronze, new oars still smelling of wood and oil. Young rowers crowd around it, wide-eyed and buzzing. Some have the nervous bounce of first-timers. Others, that exaggerated swagger only worn by those who've never been hit with a paddle by accident mid-stroke. You lean against a nearby post and watch. The captain is explaining tactics with sweeping gestures. The helmsman is retying the ropes twice. A teenager tries to lift a helmet that is clearly 3 sizes too large for his head. It's a different kind of theater, but one you know by heart. One of the boys catches sight of you. He squints, nudges his friend. Is that him? You see the question bloom across their faces. You smile slightly and walk away before they ask. Let them wonder. Let the story stay larger than the man. You pass the shipwright, who's hammering a stubborn nail into a stubborn plank. He glances up, grunts in recognition. Back already? You shake your head. Just walking. He nods and returns to his task. Some men speak in ships, others in silence. You turn into a quieter alley, one that opens up into a small square, rarely visited by anyone except cats, sandals in need of repair, and old men arguing about why onions shouldn't be considered a valid breakfast. A few elders are sitting under the shade of a fig tree. They pause their conversation as you pass. One gestures at your feet. New sandals? You nod. He raises an eyebrow. Custom? You shrug. Gift? A pause, then softly, you earned them. You nod once. The other men return to their onion debate, and you walk on. Historians rarely mention the sandals, the quiet gifts, the knowing glances, the way a man can return from something vast and terrible only to be stitched back into his city, not with parades, but with bread, with stories, with shoes that fit. But these are the things that matter, the things that remind you you are still here, not just alive, present, part of the world again. That evening, you find yourself drawn to the theater. There's a new play being performed. Something about a mythical sea creature and a foolish captain who insists he can outwit a goddess with a dinner invitation and a borrowed lyre. You pay your coin, take your seat on the worn stone bench, and wait. The play begins. It's absurd, of course, overacted, ridiculously lit. The sea monster costume looks like an old tent stitched together with feathered cloaks, but it's beautiful. And the crowd laughs. And for the first time in days, you laugh with them, a full laugh. One that makes your chest rise, your shoulders shake, and your ribs ache a little, a laugh that feels like letting go. When the play ends, you stay seated for a while as the crowd disperses. The stage hands begin cleaning up, rolling fig-colored backdrops, and whispering about how to fix the boat prop before the next showing. You rise, turn to leave, and you see it, painted in the corner of the set backdrop, a tiny trireme, barely visible. But there, no one else seems to notice it. You touch the edge of your new sandal to the stone beneath your seat, and for a moment you feel it all again. The weight of the oar, the crack of wood on wood, the silence after victory, the splash of home. You walk back under the stars. They're brighter tonight, or maybe you're just looking up for the first time in a while. You pass the notice board, more scrolls, more announcements. You don't stop. You don't need to. You've read enough. You pass a group of young men laughing by a fountain. One of them mimed rowing. Another slips and lands in the basin with a yelp. You grin and keep walking. Home waits, a bowl of stew, a cat curled on the hearth, the sound of your grandmother's voice mumbling about something in the next room. It's nothing grand, nothing epic, just the quiet proof that you came back and that you stayed. They say the sea changes a man. You didn't believe that before. You used to think it was just something old sailors said between sips of wine, when they wanted to sound wise and tragic and slightly more interesting than the man who sells turnips. But now, you're starting to see the truth of it, not in the loud ways, not in grand gestures or storm-weathered eyes, but in how your shoulders carry themselves differently, in how you listen more than you speak. How do you know the exact weight of an oar before even lifting it? It's a quiet shift, not visible to everyone, but it's there, like salt beneath the skin. You've started rising earlier, not from obligation, but from rhythm. The same rhythm that used to guide your arms when rowing. The steady pulse of effort and breath. The part of you that wakes when the light is still soft and the city hasn't quite put its sandals on. You walk through morning fog, through alleys where the street sweepers haven't yet swept and the bread ovens are just starting to hum. You greet the fishmonger's apprentice who looks surprised every time someone says hello. And you like it this way, simple, quiet, untangled from ceremony and title. But the sea isn't quite done with you. It never really is. As you sit by the docks watching gulls inspect the day's catch with disdain, a courier approaches. Young, out of breath, hair sticking to his forehead in dramatic spirals. Message, he says, holding out a scroll with your name on it. Your real name, spelled correctly, that's rare. You unroll it, and there it is. An invitation. Not to war, not to row, but to speak. At the next council meeting. They want to hear from those who were there, those who rowed, those who saw. Apparently, someone on the council is pushing for more representation from ordinary citizens with first-hand military experience. Which you suppose is a poetic way of saying, we need someone who didn't fall asleep on the command deck. You read the message twice, then roll it up and laugh. Stelios finds you a little while later. He always seems to appear when you least expect him, carrying something unnecessary and smiling like he invented figs. Is that parchment? He asks, pointing at the scroll tucked into your belt. Council invitation, you say. He whistles. What did they do, run out of statues to listen to? You shrug. Apparently they want a real account. He considers. You gonna give them one? You pause, then say, I might give them something better. He nods, satisfied. Just don't forget to wear your new sandals. Wouldn't want them mistaking you for a fisherman. You chuckle. That might actually improve my credibility. Historians still debate how much say the average oarsman had in civic affairs. Some argue the naval service was a form of silent citizenship, one earned through sweat and blisters rather than debate. Others claim the rowers were never meant to speak, only to row, fight, and vanish again into the city's stonework. You wonder, as you walk toward the council building, what kind of history you're about to make or unmake. The chamber is grand in the way that old buildings always are, columns too wide, ceilings too high, acoustics that make a sneeze sound like divine judgment. You stand near the back, scroll in hand. They call your name, this time correctly. You step forward. And for a moment the room tilts not with nerves but with memory. You see the sea. You hear the drum. You feel the oar handle in your palm. And then you speak. You don't talk about strategy. You don't list maneuvers or name generals. You talk about rowing beside men who had garlic on their breath and fear in their eyes. About the silence before impact. About the absurdity of losing a sandal in the middle of a heroic charge. About watching your enemy fall, not from bravery, but because the deck was slippery. About coming home and learning how to laugh again. You speak plainly, truthfully, and when you finish, the room is quiet, not because you've stunned them, but because they're actually listening. It's enough. You nod, step back, and walk out before anyone tries to give you another feather. Outside, the sky is wide. The sea glitters far beyond the rooftops. A child runs past you, arms spread like oars, and you smile, because you know now. You didn't need to become someone else. You didn't need a title or a statue, or even a name on a scroll. You just needed to come back and keep walking. You wake up slower now, not out of exhaustion, but reverence. The kind of stillness that arrives only after you've seen what the sea can take and what it mercifully returns. There's no rush today, no messenger at your door, no sandals to search for, no feathers to collect. The city continues outside, wagons rolling, goats complaining, bakers shouting, but it doesn't need anything from you. Not today. You rise anyway, dress, step out into the early light like a man remembering how to live in a place that has gone on living without him. And the moment your feet touch the stones, you feel it, that quiet weight. Not heavy, just present. You walk to the edge of town, to the hill above the port, where days ago you first saw your ship return, cracked and steaming, and miraculously still afloat. The same hill where children now gather to reenact their heroic interpretations of your battle, complete with toy triremes and invisible dolphins. You sit on the same rock, breathe the same salt air. But something's different now. The sea looks smaller, not less dangerous, just less loud. It's no longer a threat. It's a memory, a rhythm that shaped you, but not one that owns you. Below, you spot one of the new ships being fitted for a voyage. You don't feel pulled toward it. You don't itch for the oar. You just watch, knowing full well that someone else is about to climb aboard, tuck a fig into their tunic, and become part of a story that will sound far more glorious when told over stew. And that's fine. That's how it should be. You've had your turn. Now, you get to remember. You reach into your belt and pull out the carved clay trireme coin, the one the child gave you, still warm from your side. You turn it in your fingers. It's smooth now, the edges worn from time and touch. You place it gently at the base of the fig tree growing beside the path. A quiet offering, no speech, no ceremony, just a nod to something that mattered. That still matters, even if no one else ever sees it. You stand and you walk back home, one step at a time. The sandals are soft now. The road is familiar. You pass a dog chasing a cart, a woman hanging laundry with one clothespin in her mouth and another in her hair. You wave at the olive vendor who simply holds up a fresh branch in reply. No words exchanged, but you both understand. The seasons have changed. You've changed, and still here you are. You reach your house just as the sun begins to slip lower. Your grandmother is in the garden, muttering at the herbs again. Amphitrite sleeps in a patch of light on the stairs. You step inside, place your tunic on its hook, pour yourself a cup of water, and sit. Nothing aches, not in the old way. You're not broken, just older, quieter. You think of telling the story one more time, maybe to your grandmother, maybe to the next curious boy who shows up with a wooden toy ship and too many questions. But not tonight. Tonight, the story can rest. You close your eyes. You listen to the silence, to the breeze, to your breath, and let it all go. You lie down, and the sounds of the city begin to fade, not disappear, just soften. The footsteps outside, the creak of shutters, the far-off echo of a late market laugh, all folding into the background like waves smoothing over sand. The light in your room dims, the air cools, ever so slightly, wrapping itself around your tired limbs like a worn blanket. You breathe in, and the salt is still there, but it's gentler now. You're not rowing anymore. You're floating, drifting, not toward anything, just away from names and scrolls, from feathers and fig-stained laughter, from oars and drums and sandals lost at sea. You are no longer inside the storm. You are what remains after it, the calm that follows, the memory that lingers, the silence that stays. So, let it stay. Let your breath slow. Let your eyes close. Let your mind finally ungrip the oar. You've come home. You've been seen. And now, at last, you can rest.